Hello, and this is just a quick overview of how you could format or design your assignment. And you can use this in a variety of ways, but this is just one model you can use. So basically I've got a Word document in front of us here. I've found lots and lots of papers related to my topic, which is cancer and white blood cells and how it affects patient assessment. So that's my theme. I've found all the papers that are associated with it and I've added them to a reference list. So here they are, all down here, all in alphabetical order. So you can see a variety of papers that are there, some about research, some about cancer and screening, etc. So they're all there in a nice order and written with Harvard, using Harvard referencing. Then on top of that I write conclusion, and basically in my conclusion I'm going to have the mini conclusions of themes 1, 2, 3 and 4, which are the headings I've gleaned from all of these papers that I've read. So I've decided I've got themes from these papers, and I'll have an overarching conclusion at the end. So I'm going to have these mini conclusions which come from my themes. And if I just go to the very top, I've put in their introduction to start with. Haven't actually wrote anything, if you recall. I'll leave that to the end. Let's change the spelling on that. But basically I'll just have the subject matter of this piece is cancer and the effects on patient assessment, or whatever it is you're going to be doing. I'm going to have the discussing the theme, so I'm going to be discussing the effects of patient assessment. I'll be discussing the effects of cancer and assessment in children, and any other themes I come up with. So I'll mention these discussion points. It keeps me focused, and this is all in the introduction once I've finished the whole assignment. And then I'll put the conclusion. I only use the overarching conclusion in the introduction. So in conclusion, I find that assessment of patients with cancer is challenging in the pre-hospital environment. So whatever the conclusion is you've got, so you just add that. So that's the format for the introduction, but you do that at the end. And then we look at the main body of the essay. So I've already read all these papers and I've got a feeling about the themes. So I've got one theme there which is roughly, can change if I want. I can take this heading out as well, but the effects on patient assessment. The second theme here, I've got children with cancer, and then I'll have a third theme and a fourth theme. So basically, if you recall, I said I wanted a self-contained essay about this particular theme. So we discuss the papers and the study that we've actually read about, and we discuss it by saying, as in this case, Nakagawa 2010 suggests this, and then Larson suggests this, Rowley suggests this, and so on and so on and so on. You can read that yourself. At the end of that little section, well, I've discussed it and told the reader what the research is suggesting and what they're saying out there. So I haven't got anything that's not referenced in there in that whole section. Everything is referenced in some way. Come back to that in a second. I conclude then, I've got a mini conclusion in here. So it is clear that cancer sufferers can display a variety of signs and symptoms that can affect assessment. So that's my conclusion from that section. I'll use that then in my final, I'll drag it down to the final conclusion at the end. And then I've got a nice transition into theme 2. So I've got, it's interesting that the effect on children after altered white blood count can be more profound. Of an altered white blood count can be profound. So I'm just linking this section into this section, and lo and behold, when you go to section 2, you've got children display a wider range of adverse effects when their white blood cell count is affected, Lamb et al. 2005, and so on and so on and so on. So I'll start another section similar to this for children, but I've got a link between the two, a nice transition. And then I'll do the same for theme 3 and theme 4, and then obviously got my mini conclusion where I'm dragging all of these little conclusions down into that main conclusion, expanding a little bit, and it keeps a nice flow and a nice content all the way through. Going back to the actual content, look how I'm referencing. So I've got the end of the sentence, I've got everything in brackets with the year. If it was at the beginning of the sentence, the only thing that's in brackets is the date in brackets. So Frey et al. Suggests blah blah blah. If I use in the same paragraph, in this paragraph I want to repeat something about Frey et al, for example, I don't have to put the date in, so I just say Frey et al also suggests that the presentation of signs and symptoms blah blah blah. So this is how you put your references in, and you notice here I've got as well several papers that I've referenced in one section, so all of those papers suggest this. So the possible non-cancer related complications which are exacerbated by the reduction in white cells can be significant, and Nakakawa says that, Larson says it, Rowley and Claire say it, as O et al do, and Mendonca. So all of those are in my reference list, and all of them say that one point. It just adds a little bit of depth. If they're all agreeing it to that point, it adds some depth to your writing. And then I go on and say that Frey et al says other things. If it's more than 2 authors, you'd have et al in there. So if we go down to the reference list and find Frey, where he is. There he is. So Frey et al. So there's more than 3 authors, so it's just et al. But all of the authors are listed. And you'll notice as well that just before the last author, it says and. So it's Frey B, Hirsch J, Burnett V, Benziger O, Enderley L, and Dole C before you actually finish with the date there. And then you can do it a variety of ways, but your title of a study will be underlined, and then you've got the publishing company, author, publishing company, or the journal, with the page numbers and the journal issue number. Okay, that'll do for now. Hopefully that helps. Thank you.